Jumpin In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And here we go, careering pell-mell towards summer, which means jazz festival season.
Woohoo!
Which is always good news, and to celebrate that and to always celebrate the best in modern and contemporary sounds, you just need to be tuned in right now, here and now, to Manx Radio, 9 o'clock Saturday night, for the best in modern and contemporary jazz. It's Jumping In with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome along to this week's show. Can you believe we are only a couple of weeks away from the TT? Seems like it was only just Christmas, and yet we're nearly halfway through the year. What will you be racing away from or to? That's the question. Staying for the bikes or heading for the sun? Perhaps anything to escape the dreaded GCSE and A-level trauma of the past few weeks. So, H, what's on your syllabus this week? Or is it just the home bell that's been swinging it for you?
There's always a bell swinging somewhere. We're going to try some Daily Bread, the latest one from Joe Lovano and his trio Tapestry. And I've been down into the smoke recently, which always means a trip into Ray's and a troll round a couple of jazz record emporiums, such as they are. An interesting one from Joe Smith and his Melodic Workshop, and might try and get a bit of Nicholas Payton in.
And for me, well, one for the wife, not mine, but somebody else's. There's that one, cocoa, but not the bedtime drink. And to kick things off, well, what do you get if you take a trio of top session players, all band leaders in their own right, and add a top big band behind them? Well, one thing's for sure, they'll be vying for this spot, centre stage. Steve Gadd on drums there with original of his and indeed a track of Centre Stage. Lucky 13, Steve Gadd, Eddie Gomez on bass and the late great Ronnie Cuba on baritone, backed by the WDR Big Band. Cuba passed away last October, aged 80, shortly just after the album release. But as a last hurrah, that's certainly not a bad testament to him, and with him taking solos on each of the album's 9 tracks. The relaxed and funky groove is, of course, meat and potatoes to Gomez and Gadd, and unlike many albums we feature on the show, this one, definitely a good one for the car.
Certainly is. This next one isn't, as it turns out. We saw Ronnie Cuba, remember, a few years ago at Brussels, in fact, where we're heading off in a few weeks playing baritone sax, and very good it was too in the sunshine. A couple of beers, and he was blowing, I want to go home. Was it Go Home? I'm coming home, baby. That's the one, I'm coming home. Wonderful stuff, and we were all bopping away there. Great stuff, and sadly missed. Great character. This character is still with us, and he's a great character too. Joe Lovano, no longer one of the young cats. He's one of the, older cats, I suppose. We've been listening to and watching him since he first came to fame with Paul Motion in the early 1980s, I suppose, on the ECM label, and then went on and had that fantastic trio with Bill Frisell and Paul Motion, the Paul Motion trio for years and years. Lord knows how many albums they had, played with Paul in various settings, and then went on and has done, again, a lot of albums on various labels under his own name. Of late, he's been sort of almost going back to basics, moving away from that big sound, moving away from a lot of free sound, going back to a very spacious, very open, improvised, cool and sort of almost meditative music in many ways, where the space is almost as important as the music is, with a group he calls Trio Tapestry, and their latest just about to hit the airwaves. It's called Our Daily Bread. The trio stays the same: Marilyn Crispell on piano, Carmen Castaldi, an old friend of Joe's going way back, on drums and percussion. Very subtle stuff it is too. This track is called All 12. symbol of Carmen Castaldi, finishing off that track, all 12 from Joe Lovano's latest outing with Trio Tapestry. Marilyn Crispell at piano, Carmen Castaldi at the drums, and it follows their earlier albums, Garden of Expression, and the first one, which is just called Trio Tapestry, and it's become quite a regular thing. You get the impression Joe's quite fond of this. We actually interviewed him just after the release of the second album, and he was saying how much he'd enjoyed playing with his trio, and it was like a sort of breath of fresh air. If you go back and listen to his Blue Note stuff again, it's hard swinging, a lot of hard blowing. He's got the stuff with Paul Motion again, which is sort of quite free, but it's definitely got more of an edge to it. This stuff, it is, as Associated Press says, look elsewhere for swing or torrents of notes or chord changes. There is a momentum to the music, but silence is used as an instrument to build space between the players and what they play. And all music also says it's Lovano doesn't so much improvise as commune with them, crafting songs that have the atmosphere of a dark room of meditation. I'd agree with that. It is meditative music, as we were saying, not a calm one. So we've got one calm one. This is the late nighter again. To be honest, music you need to listen to. Sit down with a glass of something, sit down and just listen to it, and it will repay rich dividends. I've only had a brief listen through to some of the tracks. If you like the first two, you'll enjoy that. It's heading in the same sort of direction. If anything, it's even more spacious and a sort of a deep listening experience. But check it out. It's out now on ECM.
And in fact, we did have an interview with him some 10 years ago, the first time we had an interview with him. Back with the Evolution set with Tommy Smith's sextet. What a great band that was. Joe Lovano, John Schofield, John Taylor, John Patitucci, Bill Stewart. We got invited into a sound check and then back to the hotel to do an interview. But a really, really nice guy as well. And in fact, that Tommy Smith Evolution, he brought a special edition with a whole CD's worth of extra material out in 2021, available on Bandcamp if you don't have it.
Yeah, I didn't like that album first time around. I enjoyed it much better for some reason.
Yeah,
a few
me
years
too.
ago.
I thought, gosh, this is brilliant. Why wasn't I listening to it? Listen to all music. It's all good here on Jumpin In and indeed elsewhere. But next for me, a favourite of mine, and he's one of those musicians who just keeps on growing. With a company of greats such as Chris Potter on sax, Jonathan Blake on drums, Matt Brewer on bass, and David Kikoski on the piano, well, you couldn't go far wrong, could you? With the title track written for his wife, here's trumpeter Alex Sipiagin and his quintet with Mel's Vision. Lovely stuff. Since emigrating from Russia to the States back in 1991, Sipiagin has been one of the mainstays of the fantastic releases on the Crisscross label. This one being his 13th, in fact, but I think anything but unlucky. Sipiagin is enthusiastic and effusive about his choice of bandmates, and rightly so. He first played with Chris Potter back in 93, and the pair have been close friends ever since. Playing next to him, scary, says the trumpeter. He's one of those superheroes like Michael Brecker. Of course, they're different, but it's a similar feel. Scared, but at the same time he gives you ideas you've never thought up before, and you try to reach them, and reach them indeed he does, as do the other players. If good straight ahead, modern jazz is your bag, and you won't go far wrong with pretty much any of Alex's releases. Mel's Vision is out now, and thanks very much to Crisscross for sending us a copy.
Terrific stuff, and yes, I've not heard a bad bit like Jeremy Pelt. There could be a bad Alex Sipiagin album out there, I just haven't heard it yet. Ditto, Jeremy. Wonderful stuff. Listening to Jumpin In with Chris and myself, H, and another label which has marvellous music. I haven't heard quite so much of them of late. I'm assuming they're still going. Fresh Sound, New Talent, which is sort of Spanish-based. Loads of Spanish artists or coming out of Spain. A lot of the label itself, I think, was based in Spain, as I understood it. And certainly the recordings were quite often done in Spain. And this one... Well, like I said, I was down in the smoke a week or two back. Always means a drop into the ever-dwindling, sadly, supply of jazz record shops in the capital. Only one or two left, realistically, now, but Ray's is still holding out.
HMV's coming back.
HMV's coming back, which is good, if it has a jazz section, I suppose.
Indeed.
But Ray's Jazz at Foyles, it has moved and got slightly smaller in floor space, but it was still well stocked, which was something for a happy hour or so browse. And I came across this one on, as I say, the Fresh Sound New Talent label, Joe Smith Melodic Workshop, a drummer who I have to say I don't really know a great deal about, but I do recognise some of his sidemen, Bill McHenry on sax, the likes of Chris Lightcap on keyboards, and Jorge Rossi, who of course used to be the original drummer for the great Brad Mehldau, taking I think piano and drum duties on some as well. Got to be worth checking out for a couple of quid, wasn't it? Here is a track from the album which is simply called Rebel. Yeah, quirky, interesting, a little bit different. Nice one, that. Goes back quite a bit, actually. 20 years, would you believe? Recorded in 2003, as I say, on the Fresh Sounds label, which I think is still going. We're just checking on that as we were looking before. But it was, as I said, pretty much based in Spain, and indeed the music, all a collection of original pieces by Joe, first presented live at the Barcelona Jazz Festival in 2003, and then recorded for the Fresh Sound New Talent label, as we just heard there. Joe likes to give prominence to sort of melody and also to his own instrument, the drums. 2 drum sets, actually. I don't know if you noticed it in action there, as I hinted at the beginning there. Joe playing one, Jorge Rossi playing the other. Doesn't say which one's doing which, who's on sticks and who's on sort of brushes there. Jorge, obviously, like I said, with Brad for quite some time, and he also features on a few tracks playing Fender Rhodes. I think I said Chris Lightcap before on piano. Of course, he was on bass. Guillermo Klein was on piano duties, and they have 2 albums out, at least Joe had. He had an earlier one on Fresh Sounds New Talent, just called Happy, a year earlier in 2002, which I'd never heard. He says, melody is free and should be left alone as much as possible to move freely to its destination, unrestricted by impure influence. Rhythm, he says, is another animal. In this one, I'm trying to develop a sense of rhythm that's free from even structures, 4/4s or 4 or 8 bar phrases, and allow it to flow over a large pulse with the freedom to digress naturally into odd phrases. It was a good pick-up there for £6, I tell you.
Yeah, very good indeed. And they do seem to be still going with some new releases slated to come out this month, in fact, under the Blue Sounds moniker, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
nice
so
one.
I've seen that knocking around and wouldn't have connected it directly with Fresh Sounds New Talent, but there we are. Next from me, 2 brothers. Well, not these 2 brothers, and these are brothers, in spirit at least, guitarists Chico Pinheiro and Roberto Lombabo, with Ekele from their latest release, 2 brothers, which means that one. Grab your dancing shoes. Let's bossa.
Hello, this is Joe Lovano, and you're listening to Manx Radio with H and Chris. Jumping in.
yes, could they play or could they play? Louis Stewart and Noel Kellerhan. Yeah, you might have thought it was Bill Evans and Jim Hall, wouldn't you? Very much reminiscent of their Undercurrent album, and every bit as good, it has to be said. Some Other Blues, it's called. The major Irish guitar giant Louis Stewart and his friend and collaborator, the pianist Noel Kellerhan. An unreleased gem just come out, just called Some Other Blues, a holy grail of Irish jazz, the only known studio recording, it's claimed, of Louis Stewart with Noel, a local hero, but as you can hear, his talent way beyond local standard, absolutely brilliant. And yes, thanks very much indeed to Rob Adams for sending that over to us. Hi, Rob.
Hope you're listening. And before that one from the two brothers, the guitar masters Chico Pinheiro and Romero Lumbaba, who actually put me slightly in the mind of perhaps the Larry Coryell and Philip Catherine pairing on their Twin House albums, or indeed Ralph and Egberto, with that wonderful Latin feel which just says summer, doesn't it? The Latin magic of Antonio Carlos Jobim and Joe Gilberto, along with good many pop songs from Sting, the Beatles and others thrown in for good measure. Whatever the reason, that fleet-fingered pairing, absolutely magical. Grab us a pina colada on your way out, will you? Two Brothers, out now on Sunnyside label, and thanks for them for sending us a copy of that too.
Right, don't nod off just yet. Have some pleasant dreams. Here's Nicholas Payton. Oh, yes, indeed. Very pleasant. Pleasant dreams, in fact. Nicholas Payton, he comes into the same category.
He fits in with the others.
Oh, yeah, you never get a bad Nicholas Payton album, and he surrounds himself with great people. Nicholas Payton on trumpet, Tim Watfield on soprano and tenor saxes, Anthony Winsey piano, Reuben Rogers bass, and Adonis Rose, hailing from New Orleans, on the drums. And I should have said earlier on, by the way, that some of the blues track was called Minority. Great track.
Very good indeed. Well, that's just about it for this week's show. However, before we go, just time to fit in a track from the latest from saxophonist and indeed multi-instrumentalist Josh Arcolio, who I think we last saw at the Pizza Express in Jeff Williams' band.
Jeff Williams, yeah, fine player.
And I say the latest. It's in fact its only second release in his own name, some 10 years after the first. The first Beginnings is very good too, a straight-ahead jazz album, but great playing on it. This, however, his second edition records release, he's taken a different path, playing much all the instruments himself. Here's the title track, Koko, or K-O-K-O, which stands for Keep On Keeping On, a mantra from Josh's mentor, the late jazz icon Pee Wee Ellis. And we will indeed keep on keeping on, but not until next week, so bye for now.
Yeah, look after yourselves and
Take
see you
care.
then. Cheerio.